and welcome back to the Sewing Room of Garner. My name is Sandra and I will be walking you through today's tutorial. So today's tutorial we are going to be making this wristlet clutch. So this wristlet clutch comes with the foam interfacing. You've got some binding, some fabric on the main fabric, the lining. We have a zipper. We have a zipper right here. That's the zipper compartment. We have a compartment for our credit cards and our IDs, and then if you have any cash or put your phones and stuff like that, that will also go in there. So this is one option. Here is another one where we made it with a denim with embroidery. Again, this time we just had everything matched together. So the inside is just the same zipper. And this one is just a zipper one where it has a contrast on the inside. Look how pretty that is. And it's just a compartment. This is for more of like a younger girl who doesn't quite have credit cards or IDs or anything like that. So there's just a compartment for them to put their cash or their phones and things like that in a zipper. And then this is another option here. There we go. See that? So we have a lot of different variations of this pattern. See that? Very similar. We have lots of variations of this pattern, and I can't wait to show you guys how to get this done. It's super, super easy. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the cutting table and give you guys instructions and tell you what supplies we're going to need. I'm also going to put on the description below a link to get the free pattern and instructions on how to do this. So I hope to see you guys back soon, but don't forget, hit that subscribe button so that way you guys can get notifications on when I do new sewing videos. And so on today's tutorial, these are the supplies you're going to need. You're going to need basic supplies like your scissors, rotary cutter. You're going to need a seam ripper, and I'll tell you why in a second. You're going to need wonder clips today instead of pins because we are working with the foam. You're going to need a zipper foot. So whatever zipper foot came with your machine, go ahead and get that out because you are going to need a zipper foot. We got some hand thread here, and then I have some hand needles as well. This is hand quilting thread. I like to use that to finish off my my binding. You're going to need some marking tools, whether it's a pen or chalk, whatever you like to use. And then we also are going to need a magnetic snap kit. So I showed you earlier how we how we used magnetic snaps, and you're going to need a kit. So you're going to need a male and female and washers. And then you're going to need a clamp, and that clamp is for the wristlet to be attached. You're also going to need a fusible interfacing. Now this fusible interfacing is a medium weight fusible interfacing. If you only have sew-in, that's fine. I have here Inform double-sided fusible foam. You're going to need a zipper. This is a 12-inch zipper. I do suggest if you are new to these types of projects that you start with a 12-inch nylon zipper. Okay, but if you are definitely a confident beginner and have done bags before, you can definitely do a 9-inch metal zipper. I don't suggest doing anything bigger than a 9-inch metal zipper. And then you're going to need your main fabric for the outside of the bag and the inside of the bag as well. And I'll give you guys measurements on these, but a fat quarter is more than enough to make this bag. Okay, now that I've told you the supplies that you're going to need, Okay, so here are the different pieces that you're going to need. I'll set your main fabric just aside for just a second, and I'm going to go into the sizes that you're going to need for your interfacing and then your fusible foam. Okay, so in this part of the video, we're going to be doing the cutting. For detailed instructions on cutting directions, please download the free pattern that I have provided in the link below. It gives you options for both fat quarters and the 1/4 of a yard options. At this point, what I'm doing is folding up my fat quarters and cutting them up into the 8.5 by 14-inch sections that I need for the main body. Okay, so now that we've got all of our pieces cut out, what I want you to do is take your main body piece as well as your lining piece, and I'm going to have you sandwich it together with the Inform foam. We're going to go ahead and line it up with somewhere on your mat to make sure everything is straight and lined up, and then we're going to fuse it together using an iron. Make sure that when you are ironing your pieces together, you start from the center and work your way out so that you don't have any bubbling in your fabric. Now we're going to get started with our magnetic snaps. So what you're going to need is your magnetic snap kit, which includes a male, a female, washers, and then you're also going to need to get that 2.5 by 2.5 inch piece of interfacing that we cut out earlier. So now what you're going to see me do is I'm measuring either side of my fold up where the zipper patch is going to be by 4 inches. I want to make sure that both sides are even at 4 inches and that the lines on either side are straight with my mat before I fold it in half and then cut out my curve. So to cut out the curve, you can use any type of round object that you would like to use to just kind of draw out that curve. I'm going to go ahead and freehand it, and then I'm going to cut it out with my rotary cutter. now what I want you to do is to fold back the second fold, which was the fold that we placed at our 4-inch mark. At the very top of our divider, we're going to go ahead and top stitch that seam down at 1/8 of an inch. Once you've done your top stitch on the first fold, then we're going to move back our first fold and we're going to top stitch on our second fold. So you can get everything lined up, and you want to go ahead and do a top stitch at 1/8 of an inch again on that second fold. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to tack down either side of the divider. And what that's going to do is just kind of hold everything in place so that we can work on this piece later. So now that you can see, we've gone ahead and done both of our sides and the middle, and it's looking great. So this is going to be perfect for us to use as a credit card holder or an ID holder. Once we're ready with this, then we're going to go ahead and set it aside and get ready for our next part. Go ahead and trim off the excess of the strap, and then after what you've done that, we're going to turn it out. So we're going to turn out the back strap and then set it aside, and we'll get ready for our next piece. So now we're going to get our wristlet strap, and we're going to sew down the edge at 1/8 of an inch all the way down the wristlet strap. Once we've sewn that down, we are going to get our clamp and we are going to put it inside of the wristlet strap. We'll sew down the open end, and then we are going to turn it out so that the seam is underneath the loop of our clamp. We're going to need our zipper foot to get as close as possible to the edge of the middle part of our clamp. We're going to set this aside and go ahead and do our loop, and then come back to that later once we actually have attached our zipper foot. At this point, we're going to go ahead and get our zipper and our zipper tabs, and I'm going to show you where we're going to align everything. What you see me doing here is I continue to look underneath my presser foot just to make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the top of the bag rather than towards the zipper. So now that I've gotten the top stitch done on the top of the zipper, what I'm doing is I'm sewing down the two pocket edges closed so that nothing comes out and nothing gets stuck underneath the bag. Now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm lining up my zipper pouch up towards that 4-inch mark where I had folded it previously, and making sure that both sides are even and parallel to each other and that they're matching on the cutting mat. That I'm using both of my lines on either side of the cutting mat to make sure that it is even. After I've ensured that both sides are perfectly even and straight, I'm going to go ahead and clamp those down to hold it in place. Now I'm going to grab my wristlet strap from before, and since I have my zipper foot still on, I'm going to go ahead and get as close as I can to go ahead and sew up that edge, and then trim my threads, and then put that aside for the next part. I'm going to go ahead and do a top stitch on our back strap. It's going to be 1/8 of an inch away from each of the edges, and it's going to go down either side of the long edges. Now I'm grabbing my divider piece. Now this is the piece that we use for our credit card holder or our ID holder. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be inserting it inside behind the zipper pouch. Now I want to make sure that it lines up on both the left and the right, and that it's extending above the zipper. So then that way when you first open the bag, you can actually see what's behind the zipper pouch. Now you can see me kind of like messing around with it a little bit and making sure that it's just aligned perfectly. The end result is what I want those center lines to match up. So you'll see the center line that I had previously made to mark where my magnet snap was going to go, as well as my center mark of the divider. So I'm going to go ahead and line those up, make sure that the top edges are parallel and even to each other, and then I'm going to snap everything back in place. Now I'm going to grab the back strap and I'm going to line it up 2 inches from the bottom fold of the bag. I'm going to go ahead and line it up, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I put my hand inside of the strap area that it's comfortable, but it's not too tight and not too loose either. So this you will have to kind of play around with for yourself and see what is the comfortable span for you. Now what we're doing is we are going to be sewing up about 1/2 inch above where my divider is, down through the divider and down the zipper pouch. And we're going to do that on both sides. This is just going to make sure that everything stays in place so that when we do our binding, we don't have to worry about anything moving or shifting. Now this seam here that we're doing is very close to the edge, so it's definitely within the seam allowance of our binding. Now, we don't want to come in too far from this edge, because then you will be seeing the stitching on the other side, on the back side when you do our binding. So to kind of save yourself a little bit of trouble, make sure that you're stitching very close to the edge, and then just cut off the excess of the back strap when you're done. Now grab your loop, and the loop is going to be used for us to attach our clamp from our wristlet onto the wallet or the bag itself. So I kind of played around with the placement on this. I know I wanted it to be on the same side that the zipper pull is when it's closed. So in case you need to hold on to something to open up the zipper itself, you can. And what I did is I ended up actually putting it right underneath the flap fold. It actually lined up really nicely there, and then you're going to clamp it in place, and we'll be sewing it down really close to the edge, just like we did previously. Now that I'm coming to a curve, what I'm doing is I'm clipping into my binding so that I create some ease. Now, I noticed that after I made this tutorial that I really should have used bias binding. This fabric was really stiff and it wasn't quite as flexible as the last one I had used when I used regular straight binding. So I really do recommend that you use bias binding. You could still attach it the way I had shown before in the previous section of this video. But I do suggest that you do the bias binding instead of the straight binding on this application. Before I sew down the last piece of the binding, what I want to do is I want to cut it off so that an inch is left over, fold it under the bag like I had done in the previous section, the beginning part, and then sew it down as well. Now that we've got it initially stitched down with the binding, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn out my corners and fold out and refold my binding. So what I'm doing is trying to gauge to see how much fullness is in the side of my bags where the binding is. And I did find that my fullness was pretty thick in there, so I'm going to have to trim some of it back so that it's not as tight and hard to turn over into the other side and turn it over. This kind of helps with the bulkiness and turning it over. What I ended up doing is taking it off 1/4 of an inch all the way around the bag itself so that it makes it easier for me to turn over the binding. I started cutting it off with my rotary cutter and the acrylic ruler, and then I switched for the curves. I switched over to my scissors. It was just a lot easier for me to get around the corner a lot easier using my scissors rather than the rotary cutter. Now that I've got everything trimmed off, what we're going to do is we're going to fold over the binding. And what I'm wanting to make sure I do is that I extend the binding about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch past the original seam line. So where I had first sewn it, I want that next fold to go just past that so that when I sew it on the machine, I catch it through the layers when I'm sewing right inside that initial seam. So when I got to my curves, I got in a little bit of trouble here. This is where my straight binding did not work out very well. So I had to start snipping into my binding and snipping into my curves and really work this binding in. On my pattern, I did correct this and I have you guys cutting out bias binding rather than straight binding. And if you buy store-bought binding, that will also be helpful because it is on the bias and it helps and it stretches around those corners really nicely. Okay, great. So now that we have finished our phone clutch bag here, I hope you guys can make your own at home, and give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave it down below. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notifications every time we have a new tutorial or another free pattern for you guys to try. I hope you guys have lots of fun with this and enjoy it. And like I said, it's really easy. It's step by step. If the free download is going to be on the description box below, it's going to give you a link to go to download your free download, and then you can watch all of the steps along with us in the sew along. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Have a great weekend. Coming on Friday for me over here, so we're going to be having a great weekend here. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notifications when we have anything else coming up. All right, have a good one. Bye.